If any man here wishes to claim her hand. The preacher's voice cracked against the hollow church rafters. Let him speak now. Silence. The sound of wind seeped through the cracks in the wooden walls, dry, whispering, relentless. A shutter banged once, echoing like a gunshot. Martha Collins stood at the altar, her dress the color of old bone. Lace yellowed with age brushed her thin wrists. Her eyes pale, steady, fixed on nothing. No man moved. Benches creaked as a few townsfolk shifted uncomfortably. A rancher coughed into his hat. Someone chuckled low, nervous. The smell of dust and horse leather filled the air. The preacher cleared his throat again, voice trembling. Anyone? Outside, the desert wind grew louder, pushing grit through the half-open doors. The sun fell sharp and red across the wooden floorboards, cutting through the empty aisle like blood across sand. No answer. Martha's hands rested in front of her, fingers folded, trembling only slightly. She had stood through worse storms, both of weather and of people. The church bell clanged once in the distance, its sound lonely. From a back pew, Mrs. Avery whispered to her husband, "She's too old. Ain't no man need a wife who can't give him a son." Her husband grunted, "Ain't just that. She's cursed. Men who tried before her last husband." "Shoo," she hissed, but her eyes stayed fixed on the woman at the altar. The preacher looked down, helpless. Sweat traced down the sides of his collar. "Miss Collins," he began, his tone faltering. "Perhaps we—" But she didn't move, didn't blink. The air hung heavy with embarrassment, the kind that made even the candles flicker uneasily. A child somewhere outside laughed, the sound of innocence cutting through the tension like a knife. Martha's breath hitched, almost imperceptibly. Then silence again. At last, the preacher lowered his book. "Then this union." A voice cut through. High, clear, fragile. "That's her." Heads turned. The doors creaked open. A little girl stood in the doorway, barefoot, hair tangled, eyes too big for her small face. Dust clung to her cheeks like freckles. She pointed one finger, hand shaking. "That's her," she said again, louder this time. "That's my mama." The church went still. The preacher froze. A few women gasped. Men turned to one another, uncertain whether to laugh or cross themselves. Martha did not move. Her face, until that moment a mask of calm, seemed to hollow from the inside out. The girl stepped forward, one foot at a time, dragging a torn satchel behind her. Her small shadow stretched long across the aisle. "Mama," she whispered, "you said you'd wait for me." No one breathed. The sheriff, sitting near the wall, hat tipped low, straightened in his chair. His boots scraped against the floor. "Who's the child?" he asked, low and wary. The girl didn't answer him. Her eyes stayed locked on Martha, wide with desperate recognition. The preacher stammered, "Miss Collins, is this your kin?" Martha's lips parted, but no sound came. Her throat worked once dry. The wind picked up outside, howling through the church windows, making the lantern sway and throw shadows like ghosts across the walls. Someone whispered, "She don't have no kin." Another voice, "That child's lying." But the girl kept walking, step by step, until she reached the altar. Her small hand reached out, touched the fabric of Martha's dress. It trembled, then clutched tightly, as though afraid it might disappear. Martha looked down. Her breath came shallow. For a moment, everything, the whispers, the heat, the suspicion, fell away. Only that hand clutching her skirt. The preacher spoke again, softer this time. "Miss Collins." Her answer came not in words, but in the way her shoulders sank, as if years of pretending not to feel had just come crashing down. The little girl pressed her face against her. "I found you," she whispered. "I told him I would." A murmur swept through the pews like wind through grass. The sheriff rose. "Ma'am," he said carefully, "you want to tell us what's going on here?" Martha looked up, finally. Her eyes found his. For the first time that day, something like fire sparked behind them, faint but real. "I don't know," she said quietly, "but I reckon we're about to find out." The preacher took a step back, his hands trembling. "Perhaps we should." A crash interrupted him, one of the shutters slamming against the wall as a gust tore through. The candles went out, plunging the room into shadow. Gasps. When the light returned, just a flicker of dying sun through the door. The girl was standing beside Martha, holding her hand like she'd always belonged there. Martha's veil fluttered once in the wind. The townsfolk stood, murmuring. Fear, curiosity, gossip already forming on their tongues. Who's her father? Where'd the girl come from? Is it true what they say about the widow? The sheriff's boots echoed down the aisle as he approached, his eyes scanning both faces. Miss Collins, the girl's not from town. That right? Martha looked down at the child. Her fingers tightened protectively. No, she said softly. Not from town. Then where? She didn't answer. Instead, she guided the girl gently toward the front pew and sat beside her, the dress rustling like dry leaves. The child leaned into her side, still clutching her hand. Outside, thunder rumbled over the desert, distant, low, like the growl of something ancient waking up. No one dared speak. The preacher cleared his throat once more, uncertain whether the ceremony was still his to finish. Perhaps we'll conclude here. No one objected. The people filed out slowly, whispers trailing behind them. Only the sheriff lingered at the door, eyes narrowing on Martha and the girl. She looked back at him. Something in that look, calm, measured, unafraid, made him tip his hat and step aside. The church emptied into the orange light of evening. Dust swirled in the air like ashes. Martha stood at the doorway, her veil caught on a splinter, fluttering in the wind. She didn't turn back. The girl slipped her hand into hers. Together, they stepped into the dying sun. The old storyteller's voice came like wind over the canyon rim. The knock came just after sundown, sharp, hurried, afraid. Sheriff Tate's hand froze above his coffee cup. The sound came again. 3 raps, then silence. He rose, opened the door. There stood Martha Collins, veil gone, dress still dusty from the day before, and the little girl clutching her hand like a lifeline. She needs rest, Martha said. Her voice was calm, but her eyes were hard, the color of a storm. Tate stepped aside without a word. Inside, the lamp burned low. The air smelled of tobacco and rain that never came. The girl sat quiet on the edge of the cot, bare feet swinging. Tate poured water, handed it to her. What's your name, sweetheart? She looked at Martha. Martha gave a small nod. Lila, the girl whispered. Where you from, Lila? Tate asked. She shook her head. Don't know. Mama said follow the river till I found the lady in white. Martha turned away, jaw tight. Her hand trembled once, then steadied. Tate's brow furrowed. Lady in white, huh? He looked back at Martha. That sound familiar? No, she said too quickly. He studied her. You sure? The wind outside rattled the shutters. For a moment, the silence between them was heavier than the storm pressing on the horizon. Finally, Tate sighed, leaned back in his chair. Town's talking. They don't take kindly to mysteries, Martha. That girl shows up, calls you Mama. Folks are going to want answers. Martha's voice was low. Let them want. Tate watched her for a long time, then said softly, You can't protect her if trouble's following. Martha's hand froze halfway to the lamp. What kind of trouble? He hesitated. 3 riders came through last week. Didn't stop in town. Wore dusters marked with the old Carver brand. The name hit her like a shot. Her fingers clenched around the lamp's handle. Boone Carver's men? She asked quietly. Tate nodded once. Thought they were long dead. Martha looked toward the window. Lightning flared far off in the desert. For a heartbeat, her reflection in the glass looked younger, ghostly, like a memory that refused to die. They were, she murmured. Later that night, when the town had gone to sleep and even the wind had lost its edge, Martha sat by the dying fire, the girl wrapped in a blanket beside her. Lila's small voice broke the quiet. Mama. Martha swallowed hard. Yes, child. Are we safe here? Martha looked into the fire, the flames painting her face in copper and shadow. For tonight. The girl hesitated, then asked, Did you know my real mama? The air shifted. The question hung like smoke between them. Martha's hand brushed the child's hair gently. Sleep, Lila, she whispered. You need sleep. But the girl's eyes stayed open a long while, staring at the flickering light. By morning, word had spread faster than wildfire. The saloon buzzed with talk. Little girl showing up calling the widow mama. Ain't natural, someone said. Or maybe it's just frontier justice, another replied. Old sins always find their way back. Out on Main Street, Martha stepped out of the sheriff's office, the girl holding her hand. Heads turned. Whispers followed. She ignored them. The sun burned high, cruel, blinding. Horses snorted from the hitching rails. A dry wind spun dust around her boots. Then, at the edge of town, movement. A rider. Dark coat. Broad shoulders. A scar across his jaw. He slowed his horse, eyes fixed on Martha. The way a wolf studies a wounded thing. Tate stepped out beside her, thumb resting on the handle of his revolver. You know him? Martha didn't answer. The rider tipped his hat. Ma'am, he drawled, voice rough as gravel. Name's Cutter. My boys and I are looking for something that belongs to us. Martha's eyes narrowed. And what would that be? Cutter's smile didn't reach his eyes. A little girl, brown hair, maybe 6 years old. Tate's hand tightened. Ain't no such girl here. The man's gaze slid to Lila, half hidden behind Martha's skirt. Funny, he said. Looks like her to me. Martha stepped in front of the child, her voice cold. She's mine. Cutter laughed low, slow. Yours? Lady, that girl's daddy spilled more blood than rain in these parts. You sure you want to make that claim? Tate's gun was half out of its holster. You're done talking. Cutter raised his hands in mock surrender. Easy, Sheriff. We'll be back come sundown. Don't make us knock twice. He turned his horse and rode off toward the canyon trail. Dust followed him like smoke from a dying fire. Back inside, the girl trembled. Martha knelt beside her, pressing a hand to her cheek. Don't be afraid, she said softly. I've seen devils like him before. Tate poured a drink, set on the table. Boone Carver's brand, he muttered. So it's true then, he's back. Martha didn't look up. No, she said. Boone Carver's dead. Tate's eyes flicked toward her. You sound sure. I buried him myself. The sheriff froze. The only sound was the slow creak of the floorboards under their boots. You killed him, Tate said quietly. She didn't answer, only stared into the glass on the table, where the reflection of the desert sun burned like a coin of fire. Finally, she said, I ended what he started. The girl stirred in her sleep. Her small hand reached for Martha's. Martha took it gently, her old fingers trembling. Tate's voice was softer now. And the child? She's innocent, Martha said, but his blood runs in her. The kind that calls trouble home. Outside, the wind picked up again, hot, dry, carrying grit against the windows. Tate looked toward the horizon, where 3 figures rode slow through the rising heat. They're coming back, he said. Martha stood. Her expression was unreadable. Then I'll be ready. Tate frowned. With what? You got no gun, no men, nothing. She met his eyes. I've got something they don't. He waited. Time, she said, and ghosts that don't forget. That night, thunder rolled across the canyons. The girl slept under Martha's shawl. The lamp flickered, shadows stretching long across the floor. Martha rose, moved to the corner where an old chest sat buried beneath a tarp. Her hands hesitated, then pulled it open. Inside, wrapped in faded linen, was a small, tarnished star, the badge of a marshal long fallen, and beneath it a gun. Her hand hovered over it, trembling. The old storyteller's voice returned, carried by the storm's low rumble. Gunfire cracked through the morning. Sheriff Tate ducked behind a wagon, splinters flying past his hat. The gang had come at dawn, just like Cutter promised. 3 riders first, then 5 more from the ridge. Bullets tore through the town's quiet, shattering the stillness that once belonged to Red Hollow. Sheriff, a man shouted from behind Trough. They're circling the saloon. I see him. Tate barked back, firing once. The bullet hit dirt. The outlaw's laughter echoed down the main street. Cutter's voice followed, drawn out and cruel. Where's the woman, Sheriff? Hand her over, and we'll leave your pretty little town standing. A door opened behind Tate. Martha stepped out of the sheriff's office, her old wedding dress whipping in the wind, the girl's hand clutching her skirt. Get back inside, Tate hissed. Martha's gaze swept the street, calm, cold. They won't stop, she said. Not till they take her. Cutter spotted her from the middle of the road. He grinned. teeth flashing white through the dust. Well now, the bride herself. He spurred his horse forward, boots creaking in the stirrups. The others followed, guns drawn, the sun at their backs. Martha turned to Tate. I need a moment. He frowned. You're not. But she was already walking toward the church. The little girl clung to her dress, eyes wide. Mama, Lila whispered. Martha knelt, cupping her face. You stay here with the sheriff. Don't come out till I call. The girl shook her head, tears starting to fall. They'll hurt you. Martha forced a smile, gentle and steady. Not today. Then she turned, dress brushing the floor, and walked into the church. Inside, the air was still and cold. The last candle from yesterday's ceremony had melted into a pool of wax. Dust motes drifted through a beam of morning light. She crossed to the altar, lifted the loose floorboard with careful hands, and drew out the old Colt peacemaker wrapped in linen. The fabric fell away slow, like unveiling a memory. The metal gleamed dull silver, scuffed from years of silence. Her reflection in the barrel looked back at her. Not the old widow now, but the woman she used to be. Her voice came low, almost to herself. You and I buried too much. Outside, another gunshot cracked. A man screamed. Martha loaded the revolver with shaking fingers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The sound of each bullet clicking home like a heartbeat returning to life. She stepped out into the light. Cutter sat his horse in the middle of the street. The gang spread wide behind him, faces hidden by scarves and dust. Thought you might come, he called out. Ain't no bride worth her salt, letting her groom come knocking twice. Martha's steps were steady. The dress fluttered around her boots, dragging across the dirt. Her eyes locked on his. Leave the child, she said. You'll walk away with your lives. The men laughed. Cutter grinned wider. That's so? You think one old woman's going to stop us? Her hand hovered at her side. You've mistaken me, she said. I've been old all my life. The laughter died. Tate watched from behind the trough, lips parting in disbelief as she pulled the gun from beneath her dress, smooth, practiced, like muscle memory older than the desert itself. Cutter's grin faltered. Where'd you get that iron? From the man who taught me to use it, she said. Boone Carver. The name hit them like thunder. A few of the men shifted, eyes darting. Cutter's jaw clenched. That's a lie, he growled. Carver's dead. I know, Martha said softly. I killed him. The words hung there, heavy, final. Then she fired. The first shot hit the man to Cutter's right square in the chest. He toppled from his horse, dead before he hit the ground. The second shot cracked through the air, clipping another shoulder. Horses reared, chaos erupted. Cutter wheeled his mount, shouting, "Kill her!" The street exploded with gunfire. Bullets tore through windows, kicked up clouds of dust. Martha moved with grim precision, slow, deliberate, unflinching. Each pull of the trigger echoed like judgment long delayed. Tate joined in, firing from behind cover. Go, Martha, go! Smoke filled the air. A bullet grazed her sleeve, another shattered the window beside her. She ducked behind a post, breath steady. She reloaded 6 more rounds, fingers working from instinct, not sight. Across the street, Cutter fired wild, shouting curses. You think you can wipe the slate clean, old woman? You killed our leader. You think the desert forgets. Martha rose, eyes cold. No, she said, but I aim to remind it who I am. She stepped into the open again. The next shot took Cutter's hat clean off. The next hit his shoulder. His horse screamed, bolting sideways, throwing him to the dirt. He crawled, bleeding, hand reaching for his gun. Martha walked toward him, boots sinking into the dust. The rest of the gang was dead or gone, the survivors scattering for the hills. Tate shouted behind her, Martha, let him go. But she didn't stop. Cutter raised his pistol with a trembling hand. You ain't got the guts. Her answer came with the pull of the trigger. The bullet struck, echoing down the street until nothing moved but the wind. Silence returned to Red Hollow. The smoke cleared slow, revealing the aftermath. Empty saddles, broken glass, a town holding its breath. Martha stood in the middle of it, gun hanging low at her side, the lace of her dress torn and darkened with dust and blood. Tate approached her cautiously. "It's over," he said. Her eyes found his, calm again, tired beyond words. "It's never over," she murmured. Behind her, the church door creaked open. Lila stood there, small, trembling. Martha turned, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "It's all right, sweetheart." The girl ran to her, burying her face against her skirt. Martha dropped to her knees, wrapping her arms around her tight. The peacemaker slipped from her grasp, landing in the dirt beside them. Tate watched the two of them for a long moment, then looked down the street where the dead men lay. He said quietly, "You just saved this town, Martha." She looked up at him. "No," she said. "I just saved what was left of it." The old storyteller's voice carried faint through the wind, soft as dusk falling over the canyon. The wind howled through the canyon, carrying with it the acrid scent of gunpowder and burning wood. Smoke twisted up from the wreck of the outlaw camp, curling against the bruised sky. The sun was sinking, bleeding red across the ridges, and in that dying light, Clara stood alone. Her hands trembled around the cold iron of her revolver. The last man moaned near the fire pit. He tried to crawl, blood streaking the dirt. Clara's eyes were empty as she stepped toward him, boots crunching gravel. She didn't speak, didn't have to. The man froze when he saw her face, the calm of someone who had already buried too much to fear one more grave. The outlaw whispered, "You ain't no bride." Clara's revolver clicked once. "No," she said softly. "Not anymore." The gunfire cracked. Silence followed. Only the desert wind remained, whistling through broken bottles and scorched canvas. Behind her, the little girl peered out from where she'd been hiding in the wagon's shadow. Dirt streaked her cheeks, but her eyes, blue like a winter sky, were steady on Clara. The older woman holstered her gun, chest heaving once before she turned. "It's over," she said. "You can come out now." The child ran to her, arms wrapping tight around the dusty folds of Clara's dress. For a long moment, neither moved. The sky darkened. Coyotes began to yip in the distance. Then Clara bent down, her gloved hand brushing a lock of hair from the girl's forehead. "You did good," Clara whispered. "You stayed quiet. You were brave." The girl sniffled. "Mama." The word caught Clara off guard. For a second, she almost corrected her, but stopped. Something softened behind her eyes, something she hadn't felt since before the war took her husband and the world turned mean. She looked down at the child again. "Let's get you home." Clara turned toward the horizon, where the desert stretched endless and gold under the setting sun. Her horse waited nearby, sides flecked with dust and sweat, reins looped around a half-buried post. She lifted the girl into the saddle, then swung up behind her, the leather creaking under her weight. From the ridge above, the sheriff and a handful of townsfolk watched the smoke drift up. Their horses pawed the ground nervously. None spoke at first, until the sheriff tipped his hat low and muttered, "That woman just did what 10 men couldn't." An old ranch hand beside him spat into the dust. "Guess the bride no one wanted turned out to be the one we all needed." The sheriff nodded. "Reckon so." They watched as Clara guided her horse down the trail. The child pressed close against her. The sky was burning orange now, streaked with purple, like the world itself was holding its breath to watch her go. As they rode, Clara's eyes stayed fixed on the horizon. Each hoofbeat echoed like a memory of the man she'd lost, the home she'd buried, the life she'd thought ended when the wedding bells went silent. But out here, among the whispering sage and dying sun, something stirred again. The little girl spoke softly. "Mama, what's going to happen now?" Clara smiled faintly, though her eyes never left the distance. "We ride till the stars come out," she said. "Then we keep riding, 'cause some folks don't get to stop." The girl leaned against her, small hands gripping the reins. "Are you going to marry again?" Clara's laugh was low, weary, and almost kind. "Darlin'," she said, "I reckon the desert's my only groom now." They rode through twilight. The wind brushed her veil, torn and stained from the fight, and lifted it behind her like the ghost of what she'd once been. By the time the first stars broke through, the town behind her had gone still. Only the faint ring of the church bell carried across the plain, tolling soft as a farewell. And somewhere, years later, folks would still tell the story, how the old bride, no one claimed, saved the town from ruin, rode off with a child she called her own, and vanished into the wasteland. They'd say that when the desert wind blew hard enough, you could still hear her spurs jingling through the canyons, could still see her shadow under the moon. And the storyteller's voice, old and cracked as the plains themselves, would end the tale the same way every time. Some women marry men, some marry the desert, but that one married justice. Then the fire would pop, and the wind would shift, and the story of the bride who rode away would fade, like hoof prints in the dust.